When talking about these wider issues like the riots, the protest, and police reform, it's often important to establish your values ahead of time. Establish that you agree on common principles, and establish what your priorities are. Because very often, two people talk, and they misread each other's motives. They misunderstand why the other person's saying what they're saying. Someone might be taught, like I often talk about, the need for the left to have different messages and narratives and to denounce this radical, some of this radical fringe. I think that can be important in supporting the wider movement for goals most of us agree on. Sometimes people read that to say that I am overly focused on that and that I somehow don't care about supporting the wider issue of police reform, and that's fundamentally untrue. So it's important to unpack what your deeper values and priorities are, and when you establish that and build a little bit of trust, then you can explain why you're concerned about what you're concerned about, why your concerns are what they are. And for example, in my case, I often talk about the need for the left to have a better narrative that distinguishes the wider movement and the overall cause of the protest from the fringe violence. It draws a line of separation between the two, it makes a moral distinction, and clears some of the smoke fog and clears some of the smoke screen that many people have about what the movement's about. Many people see tearing down Lincoln or crazy acts of fringe violence or vandalism of small local businesses, and these are going viral on YouTube, and these things are amplified as well by fake Antifa accounts run by Boogaloo Boys, by Russian propaganda, and also exacerbated by actual violence done by some, what I consider to be, fraudulent social activists and criminals and opportunists. And these people often get conflated with the wider movement. And there's countless people, millions of Americans, that actually are in the zone of being persuaded, that would get on board, that would understand why this movement's important, but all they see is the fringe violence or tearing down Lincoln. And the teardown of Lincoln was done by that's an outlier event. There's people, a few people on the fringe, for whatever reason, decided to tear down Lincoln. That's terrible. Everyone should get on the same page and say, that's not us, that's not what we support, that was an outlier few, don't let that distract you from the main issue. But if we're silent on that, if the left will not condemn its radical fringe, if it will not unanimously condemn the violence, it becomes propaganda rocket fuel for the enemy, for Russia, for white supremacists and others to use and amplify these instances, to try to conflate the extreme violence with the wider movement, and to stir a false narrative of civil conflict and stir racial animosity. We have to counter that. And I come from a psychological warfare background where creating these counter narratives is extremely prominent. So we have to unpack why we're approaching a problem the way we are, having the humility to listen to each other, and try to learn something, and try to realize sometimes we're wrong, and look at expertise, look at relevant fields of expertise that could teach us something. Counter-extremism, communication, counter-narratives, information warfare. This has been going on for 2 decades in Iraq and Afghanistan. I've been to both war zones. These are my areas of expertise. This applies here in the home front more than ever, and we need to start learning from it. And we need to start learning to have conversations and talk to each other so that we can get on the same page when it comes to things that are most important, and not let the fringes and the propaganda distract and divide us and hijack a better world.